that I can rarely get to work. And also we don't use Zoom at my agency. So, um, okay. So like Stacey said today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about member life cycle, like the adjustment of being a member, and then a little bit about self-care just as it relates to compassion and social justice fatigue. Um, if you have questions, I'm happy to take any at the end. Otherwise, in the chat, whatever works for me. But we'll jump into it. So maybe if my thing wants to click, maybe. Okay. Um, so a little bit about me. I have worked in with around AmeriCorps as a member or a staff person for the last 8 years. So, um, my like spring semester of my senior year, I had like a full crash out that I had just spent all this money on college and I had no direction in life. And that is a really fun feeling to have. And one day I was in our student leadership center on my campus, and the full-time AmeriCorps member was like, "You should do what I do. Like, I'm moving on to my next contract." And I was like, respectfully, I don't know what you do. Um, but we talked a little bit about it, and I was like, "Ooh, that is something I actually would like." So I was a full-time member with what is now Seed Coalition, at the time was Campus Compact AmeriCorps, and I served 2 full-time terms after I graduated from undergrad. And in those terms of service, I was placed in the Office of Community Engagement, and I did a lot of civic engagement with local partners. I oversaw like the youth mentoring program, which you can see on the bottom right there. We had men's basketball as mentors. We got to bring all of the kiddos to a game. Some other things that I participated in were our annual day of service, like sessions and like conferencing for local partners, that sort of thing. When I was done with my AmeriCorps term, I was hired on at my host site, and I was bear with me here, it's a very long title. I was the Assistant Director of Community and Student Engagement and Program Manager for Education for Service Scholars. And EFS, you can see those kiddos. Well, I guess they were adults, but those are my kids. So you can see them in the top right of my screen. That was an AmeriCorps-based scholarship program. So the university had a private funder put up money. All of the students did AmeriCorps and had to pick a civic engagement project locally. And then in 2021, I came to Volunteer Iowa, where I'm a program officer. So you all are a part of our AmeriCorps state programs. My role in that is to help oversee and provide guidance and compliance based on federal policy and regulation, to support your program staff, to support you. So those are some photos from the past AmeriCorps lives. A little bit about Volunteer Iowa, though. Volunteer Iowa has commissioners. It's a commission-led agency. We work with a ton of partner agencies across the state, a lot of whom do AmeriCorps state, Vista, RSVP, or seniors. So several branches of the AmeriCorps family. We have our own Vista grant, and then we have a really active seniors in RSVP, which is another type of seniors program, who also engage with AmeriCorps just in a way that might look a little bit different from what you all do in your roles. But our goal is to help develop programs and agencies to fulfill their missions, to civically engage Iowans all over the state, promote community service, and then also down to the individual level where we can help connect individuals with the appropriate opportunities. So a little bit about Volunteer Iowa and my role there. But what we're here to talk about today is a member life cycle. Um, so like I mentioned, I've been a member myself. I've also managed members directly and now work with programs to help programs support you through your member life cycle. What you're looking at now, is the life cycle that has been outlined and is outlined, and that your program staff work through to get you the technical process to get you on as a member. So that recruitment stage, obviously at this point, you all have gone through AmeriCorps screening and NSCHC. It's a huge part of AmeriCorps management from an administration side. And then obviously you've accepted, you go through the enrollment process, you get to work on the really intuitive My AmeriCorps portal. And then orientation and training. This one, while it's only one single piece of this support chart, but continuous support is everything that happens between your orientation and onboarding and when you exit, which is like the meat of your experience, right? That's when you get to work with community partners, complete your service, work on your service projects, like the whole shebang. So we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about this continuous support piece and what that looks like. And then you exit AmeriCorps and maybe sign another term, or maybe get hired on by your organization, or have found a new opportunity because of the organization you were at. All of which are great because that's like the whole purpose of AmeriCorps. This is the cultural adjustment curve, and I like to refer to it in a lot of my trainings related to members because the cultural adjustment curve is something that you experience as members, your host sites experience with you as a new member, community partners may be experiencing. And also, just like as a general thing, I think this is like a really appropriate reference, like just in any season of your life. One of the students I advised moved to New York when he graduated, and he was like, "This was my lifelong dream." And for like 2 months, he was like, "I'm having the time of my life." And then he called me and he was like, "I think I made a mistake. I'm having the worst time of my life. And this is something I've been dreaming of." And I referenced this to him and we kind of worked through it. And he called me a few weeks later and was like, completely shifted my outlook. This is where it's at. So let me tell you a little bit about it. The cultural adjustment curve describes any like new experience space you're coming into. It could be personal, professional, where when you come in, everything is new and exciting. You're like on high. You're like, this is gonna be great. I have this great opportunity, like right at my fingertips. I'm gonna have the time of my life. I'm gonna get all this great work experience. And then maybe you have to like, I don't know, be in My AmeriCorps. That doesn't work, or there are like processes or procedures, or sometimes with like AmeriCorps, there's like federal regulations that may prohibit certain things. Or like maybe you feel like, well, this could be easier if I could only do this, but there are other powers at play that prohibit you from doing that thing. Kind of those everyday annoyances of like, I don't know, like this is kind of frustrating. And then you kind of work through those things and you're back up and you're like, okay, I feel like I have a good handle on this and I feel good about it. And then once you're like really in the throes of your service experience or your service term, you have to like confront maybe some deeper issues, especially working with people in like civically engaged spaces. Sometimes there's like policies or systemic or other things that you're confronted with that you're like, ooh, this is really bad and I'm having a bad time and I'm frustrated that I cannot change and fix all of these things right now. Um, but then ultimately we like get back to this place of uh where we can feel supported in our own work and we can feel like our work is contributing to the change we want to see. But it's like normal actually if you're like not experiencing at any point in like any of your jobs, your service term, changes in your personal life, if you're not experiencing these points of like, oh, I'm frustrated or I have to confront these deeper things, then maybe I have some other concerns for you because this is super normal. And I think it just is helpful to like acknowledge it and like consider how you move forward from it or how we work through the issues that maybe are frustrating you or things that you can do for yourself to feel like you're working through these like deeper issues at play. And then also I want to mention and I think I briefly mentioned it before, your host sites also go through this. Depending on like your term type, the length of your term and that sort of thing, like your host sites may get a new member in that role every year, or depending on the term or position, like a couple members every year. And every time they also get a new member, they're like going through this curve with you to learn how they can best work with and support you in your service, and so that you can best support your service site and what you have set out to do at that service site. Okay. This is something that if you're willing to share in the chat, I would appreciate from you all. This is just generally how you would feel supported during your term of service. So this snip is actually from, I want to say a couple years ago, and this was some stuff that your program staff had noted that they try to do for members to support them during their term of service. So maybe visiting you at your site, providing additional opportunities for development, doing regular check-ins for you, advocating for changes that would benefit for you, general communication, timekeeping support, that sort of thing. But if there are things that you feel like would support you as a member, or that you would like to see in the support processes from your host site or staff, if you could consider that and maybe drop them in the chat, I would appreciate that. Um, just generally, everyone is going to feel supported differently, or maybe have individual preferences or like goals in their support. But if there's something that you would really like to see from your host site or program that we can take note of to share back with your appropriate staff members in there in your host sites as applicable, I'm happy to do that today. We'll just pull the chat down. So if there are things that you continue to think of or do think of, um, feel free to continue to share them. I mean, the chat is not going away. Someone to review goals with weekly or monthly. I really like that because I think, like, as much as your AmeriCorps term is intended to support like your host site and the goals set forth by your host site, like a lot of you, I'm sure, have joined AmeriCorps because you have specific personal goals, and like I know it's the goals of your programs to also help you reach those goals too. So thank you for sharing. Appreciate. Uh, Catherine, opportunities to connect in person with other AmeriCorps members and staff. I am so glad you said that because actually, my next slide is our AmeriCorps State Programming Reach. That's crazy. This is just a snapshot. This is not the most recent one. There was, I'm sure several of you are aware that some programming this fall started maybe later than planned due to things outside everyone's control. So this I think is from last year. This is just AmeriCorps State Reach in the state of Iowa in a general year. So I'm sure you all have talked about, we have a lot of programs in the state that support or serve AmeriCorps, period. These are AmeriCorps state programs that support things like literacy, social emotional learning, conservation, etc. Obviously, Iowa's a rural state, so there are areas that are more barren of AmeriCorps than others, but several of your programs have overlapping areas and host site areas. So there are ways to connect, and like that's something that we as Volunteer Iowa have said in the past, that your program staff can help you facilitate but don't necessarily have to own. You as members like can coordinate and connect and meet in person. I think we were in Cedar Rapids on host sites one time as like Volunteer Iowa staff. And we met with like three different programs that one day who were all in Cedar Rapids. And we had said, oh, we just came down the road from meeting with so and so. And all of the members that we were with were like, there are other AmeriCorps members in Cedar Rapids. And there are. So if AmeriCorps is a really unique experience and something that like a lot of the times only other AmeriCorps members can like really connect with you on. And even therein, a lot of you having different experiences because like some of you support children's literacy and some of you like operate chainsaws. So that's maybe a little bit different, but there's a lot of opportunity to connect with other AmeriCorps members. Like I mentioned, this chart that or this map that you're seeing is AmeriCorps State, but we also have AmeriCorps Vista, AmeriCorps Seniors, all of that sort of stuff. So if that's something you're interested in, totally a possibility, something we would encourage. I do think it makes a huge difference in your experience to get to connect with others who are having a similar experience. The members I managed worked or served in cohorts, and they all had individual service sites, but they had like a weekly lab where they met with their cohort to talk about civic engagement, like service at their sites, planning service at their sites. And it made like a huge difference. And like this was unique because they were all college students at the same college. But like some of them I know factually only got through their 4 years of college because they were in this cohort and like their peers were holding them accountable in like a we're all gonna get through this together sort of way. So and then I will make the slides available. So this map will be on it and then I know, I'm literally gonna make a note right now. We have an interactive map on our website. And so I'll double check that that link is currently public and I will get that to your program staff members. And if I can't get you the map specifically, we can get you a list of sites in Iowa where members are serving, which visually is not as pleasing, but we'll get you the information you're looking for. Okay, talking about the life cycle of a member, ultimately, at some point, you will graduate from being a member, whether it's you find a new opportunity or you have in some combination of terms hit your two full-time Ed Award equivalents by means of AmeriCorps math. Uh, Something that I think is helpful for members, and I've worked with a lot of members and just civically engaged youth with before, is civic engagement pathways as an option for volunteerism or careers. So I just will like note for maybe the other program staff listening, Seed Coalition has a really neat activity that uses like civic pathways and identifying civic engagement pathways and types. So maybe a thought for later. But there are a ton of civic engagement pathways. These are just a couple. So if maybe you're really into research, there's areas for research and civic engagement for varied communities, industries, right? Like civic engagement is really endless. Philanthropy and fundraising is huge. Public works, so like building, maintaining public spaces. Education is obviously huge in that it could be anything from like, you can't do this as a, like, voter education is not something we do in AmeriCorps, but it is something that people who are civically engaged like to do on their free time or as a career when they're done with AmeriCorps. Um, Charity action, advocacy, partnerships. So a ton of options. And like I said, as careers or as volunteerism. Uh, so when I was an AmeriCorps member, I had to sit on the mentoring board for our local school district. And a lot of that was professionals with non-mentoring careers supporting the specific agency. So one of our board members was a lawyer who would vet all of the MOUs and all of the contracts we put out And so while some lawyers are very tied to civic engagement, that was not specifically her professional career, but she used her professional skill sets in a volunteering capacity um, to support an organization in her community that she really believed in and that she wanted to be successful. Another example I'll use is I advised several digital media students who like wanted to work in the news industry, but like also supported our small local nonprofits by doing videography or photography for them, because that's not something that maybe this small nonprofit who has a staff of one person, maybe that's not their skill sets, and that's fine because not everyone can have every single skill set. But just something to consider for during and past your AmeriCorps term is ways that you could be civically engaged if you feel strongly that that is your career pathway and that's something that you want to continue doing, or if you have these other niche skill sets that may benefit an organization in a volunteer capacity. Which leads me to my next topic, but that's a part of this like grander um, idea of civic engagement and volunteerism is compassion, fatigue, and self-care. So I've linked a couple times. Shelly Tygielski did like a 7-part series for Mindful that talks about compassion fatigue. You may have heard it referred to as social justice fatigue. Essentially, it is something that a lot of people who work with other people experience because you're giving pieces of yourself to help support others, and it can lead to burnout. We'll talk a little bit about that. But I really like this quote from Shelley, and it's self-care is a radical act of love that increases my capacity for impact, which essentially is just saying that if you are not in a space to be giving and doing like the good work that you are, your impact might not be what you want it to be because you're lessening your own capacity. So, compassion fatigue extends beyond just like the feeling of empathy. So, nurses experience this a lot, social workers, people who work in the disaster field. Um, if you're engaging with people who are like high need, maybe are disenfranchised, communities that are experiencing trauma, those experiencing devastation, and are regularly exposed to that, you can experience compassion fatigue, and ultimately that can lead to burnout. If you're burnt out, you cannot be supporting those communities in the way that you may want to support them, because again, you're just like leaving yourself no personal capacity to complete those goals. I link in the slides that will be available to you. I've also linked a little bit from Psychology Today about compassion and fatigue. So just some signs of fatigue and burnout. If you've like come into your AmeriCorps term or maybe like a professional career and you're like, I like really want to serve this specific community and I'm excited to serve this community, and you're feeling like something that once brought you a lot of joy and that you felt really strongly and fiery about, and now you're just not feeling that way, you might be experiencing compassion fatigue. If things are like more than normal, making you irritable, if you're more exhausted than normal, feeling like nothing you are doing is working, that sort of thing can all be signs of compassion fatigue and ultimately lead to burnout. So, um, I'll use an example. When I was a staff member at the college, to be a part of one of the scholarship programs that I oversaw, you had to be Pell eligible, first gen, um, rural, rural Iowa. So I had this like amazing group of students who no one in their family had ever been to college before. They're generally from like low income areas. Like they had to be Pell and Iowa tuition grant eligible. And I feel like twice a day, every day, I was in financial aid because financial aid was like not stacking scholarships appropriately and like leaving the students with lesser, which was like not the goal of the program, right? And I felt really strongly about that. And I spent a lot of time and energy like fighting those battles, which is absolutely something I would do any day of the week because like I felt strongly that these 18-year-olds were not to be taken advantage of by the system. Um, but then I literally would like lay awake at night and be like, I have not done enough. I've not done enough to protect my students, and I've not done enough to change the system, and I've not done enough to like uphold the policies and procedures that we set forth. And it was like me as one person trying to work in this like grander federal system of student aid and the allowabilities in individual college financial aid offices and like just going through all the hoops. So, and then at that point, I could not give my best self to support my students, which is not like that was not my goal. I wanted to give my best self to help them be successful in college and in their AmeriCorps terms. And like all of these things are things that I was experiencing. And then I just like was in a very bad place to continue to do the work that I really had set out to do in the first place. So recognizing these signs and then doing things to like help like self-regulate or like identify where you have to like support or not support, my bad. Separate yourself from the failures of the system as like not an individual failure. Huge. Um, which is the first rule from Shelley that I mentioned earlier that will be linked. 5 basic rules for self-care. Yourself is bigger than you, so you also have to consider, yes, you should prioritize yourself and your own well-being, but especially when you're working in like community spaces, civic engagement, where you're engaging with all these other people, like your energy and your goals, or like even friends or family, all of those things, right, are interconnected in how you are self-regulating and then how that impacts not only yourself but those around you. Um, Self-care is inclusive as in for everyone, and everyone can benefit from self-care. But it is important to note, and it's noted several times through this series, that self-care is not self-indulgent. So I think we're all very aware, myself included, about the AmeriCorps Living Allowance, and maybe we're like not making Jeff Bezos money. So if like my friends and I get blind boxes, if it's something that's going to cause you more anxiety or stuff on the back end, it's not self-care, that's self-indulgent, which does not serve you in your self-care journey. If you will go and buy 50 blind boxes, maybe that's going to cause you some stress later. That is not self-care. Um, Self-care is absolutely difficult, but also is worth the work. So, um, there are things that we'll talk about in a couple more slides that are like, I could change this today. Like today, specifically, I could go to bed early and maybe feel a little bit better tomorrow. But there are also some things that take a lot of time and a lot of energy to adjust habits or cycles or to work towards like a greater and larger goal. Um, all of those are important, but can be a lot of work. And then self-care is not one size fits all. So what works for you may not work for your peers, may not work for the other members you speak to on these calls. Some of the things may, but you just really have to do some of that like self-reflection to figure out what is going to work best for you. Um, this is more from Shelley, where she said, "We know that self-care is good for us. It increases our emotional and physical health. It builds resilience and paves the way for kind, compassionate engagement with the world around you." So when you're engaging with all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds, like I mentioned in a previous slide, who may be experiencing some level of trauma or devastation, um, not to say you build resilience to like not be affected by those things, but to practice enough self-care that you can continue to come back to your service site or to your work in the future and do the work that benefits them and serve those communities in the way that you want to. Okay, practicing self-care. So I mentioned changing habits, maybe your sleep schedule, maybe your screen time. Those things can have impacts. It may be better your self-care if those are things that are impacting how you're feeling. Building a community of care. So do you have a support system? Like, do you have friends that you can like genuinely speak to um and share in your struggles and support system in that space? Resources available to you. A lot, if not most of your programs engage with like MAP that has some counseling services available. If your program doesn't specifically have MAP, they have some other equivalent. That's something that the commission requires. And then giving time for yourself to kind of do that reflection of what types of self-care are going to best serve you in your individual journey and in the service you're completing. This I do not need you to drop in the chat, just something that I wanted to include for consideration. And maybe you're like very new in your service term that you've not hit the point where you're like mad at everything. So you can pocket this for later. But when considering your self-care, what is one thing that you could start today? And then what is one thing that would be like a long-term goal to see an impact or change in yourself and how you can come into your community spaces to do your best work, your best service, and then support the communities in the way you want to see them supported. So again, I don't need you to put this in the chat. It's just something that I wanted to include. Okay. I know there's a lot of things about self-care and how we have to like take care of ourselves, which is not my favorite thing to do, but is important nonetheless. I'm happy to take questions about like member service terms, member engagement, AmeriCorps to the best of my ability. I don't know what AmeriCorps does all the time though, so. Yeah, I can send it to, so I will upload the video when I get the recording link, but I will make sure that the program staff have the slides so that you all can access it. And then I have it noted to make sure that our interactive map is live. And if it's not live, I'll make sure that you can access host site locations or get the most recent updated printout of it.
Hey, Tani, can you go back to the cultural adjustment curve?
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. So I just really wanted to quickly share, because I think this curve is like a really great frame of reference for when you're going through your AmeriCorps experience, and just like like Tani said, any time in life where you're trying something new or adjusting to a new work environment, a new friend group, like whatever it is. But just most of you just started your service. So all of you are very much in that everything is new, exciting, and different. And it's just important to note that it is normal. In AmeriCorps and in all things in life, there are going to be challenges. So I appreciate Tani just giving this presentation to help prepare for that, and also thinking about the compassion fatigue that is probably very likely to happen. A lot of you are in positions where you're doing service projects that are physically taxing, emotionally taxing, mentally taxing. You're dedicating your time and energy to your community. And so getting to that and thinking on the curve, like the confronting deeper cultural, personal issues, that tends to happen, somewhere at the mid to later point of your service or in the beginning. Every person's different, but please talk to your site supervisors when this happens, talk to your program staff when this happens. This isn't something that we want you to be struggling with alone. It is probably bound to happen. And so I just wanted to note that, please connect with us so we can help you overcome those stages in your service and get through it.
Something that I will say that was like always when I was working with members directly, that was like always my biggest like dying hill is I can't help you if I don't know. And I think a lot of times, and this is like not, I think it's like a social thing, like a lot of us have been socialized to like not ask for help or to feel like we should just be able to do the things, and like that is not true, and especially not in like civic engagement. Like it truly takes a village in every aspect. um and something I would like pull this up for students all the time because it was always like right around midterms, I would have the AmeriCorps members that I was advising who are also students come in and be like, I'm quitting school. I can't do this. I'll never be successful. I'm having a really hard time in classes. I cannot adjust to college. I cannot adjust to my service site. And I was like, ooh, actually, let me pull up this chart for us. And then we would hit like the couple weeks before finals and they'd be like, I'm okay. And then like after the first of the year, we'd be not okay again. But um it was only because like the members that shared those things I could help provide resourcing for and I could provide additional support for. So like some of like my members like needed really to meet with like the on-campus counselor to just talk about some of their like imposter syndrome as a first generation student and how they were really struggling to like feel like they were meeting all these expectations of the people around them at the school, in their scholarship program, at home with their family. Like, those are all normal feelings. And like I mentioned, if you were never having feelings of like, I really don't like this, or I'm having a hard time, that would be like more peculiar than you being like, I'm having a hard time right now. And so, like Erin said, this would literally be my dying hill forever. If you let someone know there's usually something that we can do to like support you. And I'll also just like plug some of the administrative processes of AmeriCorps. If there's something that's like really impacting like your term of service, like you were genuinely so sick or like you had to go to the hospital or have surgery or whatever, some not every circumstance, but there are a lot of circumstances where your program staff can work with us at Volunteer Iowa to like make accommodations where we're able to given like the federal guidelines. But I don't, and I think we see that your program staff have seen this, we've seen this at Volunteer Iowa, where members hit a point where they're like, I had this big life thing happen and I'm behind and now I just need to give up because I'll never catch up. I don't want you to feel like that because really genuinely, if it's a circumstance outside of your control, we have some pathways for accommodation and adjustment to help you navigate that and then like be the most successful we can let you be in your term. So
Yeah, and we want you to be successful.
we
That's
want you to
literally
be
our goal.
successful.
Yeah.
I want you to be successful. I want you to feel like you can serve your communities in the capacity you set out to do. So there are options. I feel like I had to have that conversation like 3 times a week when I was managing members that they were like, well, I just need to quit because now I'm behind. And I was like, we're not quitting. We're gonna get through it.
Does
Because this is
anybody have
also,
any questions? Oh, I'm sorry,
no,
Tani.
I was just gonna say, like, I know we talk a lot about serving your community, but like AmeriCorps is also a training program, and like you should leave AmeriCorps feeling like you had good experiences and you've had experiences to prepare you for your next venture. Even if it's another AmeriCorps term, like you should be getting experience that will help you in that next AmeriCorps term or in your professional career or whatever it may be. Yes, I'm happy to take questions.
Seeing none, give you a few more seconds. While
Just
we wait, Tani, I do want to say thank you so much for joining us and sharing about, I specifically like this cultural adjustment curve. I'm going to dig in a little bit more.
Yes,
Um,
it's tough too.
yeah, definitely. And oh, joining us just to go. And I promise next month I will get rid of the dings and the dongs and all of that noise. So bear with me, that won't happen again.
And I have one more thing, just because I always like to have data on my side, and we are exploring opportunity, like ways to engage our members in person, which is obviously difficult because we're all across the state. But show of hands, or if you just want to drop in the chat, like, would you like opportunities to connect in person with other AmeriCorps members / staff?
Would you like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you want to like just say yes in the chat or something, that would be super helpful for us to have some numbers behind that. Okay, awesome. Like seeing the yeses. Appreciate the honesty on no preference. That's cool too.
Coffee or lunch. Nice.
Okay, thanks so much for sharing. This is helpful.
The next step would be finding out where everyone's located.
Yes, yeah. Well, we have a map.
We do have a map.
And we can keep the conversation going. So what is the date for our next one? Do you have a calendar in front of you, Erin?
Yes. So as always, the Lunch and Learns are on the third Thursday of the month from noon to 1. So that means the next one is going to be on November 20th.
Perfect. So again, thank you all for joining us today, and look forward to access to the PowerPoint and map. And hopefully we'll see you here next month. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Tawny.
Yeah,
Thanks
thanks,
everyone
Anne.
for joining.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.